Hey guys, Magnus Robert here. We're doing another tier list ranking thingy-majingy, and we're going to be doing which characters are show superior, comic superior, same level, or not applicable for those characters who aren't in the comics. So we're going to be using this one that I normally use, this character tier list. I'll link in the description. Obviously, I've changed the tiers though, so you'll have to do that if you want to do this too. And basically what we're going to be doing is talking about which characters are superior in which medium. So either the comic or the TV show. Now, of course, some of these characters are not in the comics, so they will just go into the NA. So starting off, we've got Aaron. Okay, so we'll just leave him in here for now and we'll talk about him. So comic Aaron, I think is cool enough, but I feel like he kind of doesn't really do much post All Out War. I feel like he kind of does fall into the background a little bit. So I feel like Aaron is a show superior character for me. Abraham is a show superior. It's just easy. I think comic book Abraham was definitely cool, and I think especially some of the bonding stuff between him and Rick was done a lot better. You know, their sort of relationship and their kind of the fact that Abraham was kind of his second in command. Now, I think Daryl largely overshadows that in the show, so we don't really get that as much. However, I think just from the development they did with Abraham's character, I think was better in the show. Like, we see the flashback of what happened to his family. We get, I think, a bit more of an explanation as to why he was so easy to believe Eugene's cure lie. And also they give that to Abraham. That reveals Abraham's episode. Whereas in the comic, they kind of give it to Rick, and it feels a little robbed. Although Abraham definitely is upset and mad, it definitely is given to Rick in the comic, which feels a bit weird. And as far as death, I personally think Abraham was the right person to die at the end of Lucille. Glenn, I'm starting to think now that Glenn was not the right death. Although it makes sense for the story, I think they should have done more with Glenn's character before he receives that death. But Abraham is like a perfect opening and close shut book, like of a character arc. It's really good what they did in the show. Now we got Aiden, who does not exist in the comics, so he's just going to go into the NA. I'm trying to think of if there's a character who could be a counterpart to him, but I can't think of one. Alden is another NA, unfortunately. Alan is essentially an NA, because although there is a character called Alan in the comics, who obviously is at the Atlanta camp group, this Alan and that Alan are not the same character really at all, apart from sharing the same name and the same sort of names of their family. But if I'm going to sort of compare the two anyway, I will say the comic is superior, but not by much, because Alan in the comics doesn't really do much anyway, so it's more just like, I find this plotline quite annoying. So at the very least, I didn't find Alan annoying in the comics. Alpha, so for this one, it's a comic superior. I think the problem is Alpha in the show was great up until like halfway through season 10, where I feel like she really outstayed her welcome. Now, granted, she doesn't survive too much longer past that, but I feel like the Whisperer story arc as a whole really probably should have ended at around the sort of mid season finale of season 10. I think they should have wrapped it up a bit quicker. The Whisperer War is cool in the comics, and they just fumbled it so badly in the show. All the build up to it was great in season 9, up into the Pike deaths. All that was brilliant, and then the sort of stuff after that, I don't know, it just kind of really fizzled out, and they did some weird things, like, you know, Alpha. I like the episode with Alpha and Beta, you know, the sort of flashback episode. And I like the stuff with, I think her death was okay. Although I disagree with Negan killing her. I think it probably should have been Lydia, or maybe even Daryl or Carol. But, and I know that that's in the comics, but I feel the same about the comics. Although in the comics, I think it works a bit better, because Negan's not really, he's not sent by Carol. He does it to basically impress Rick, you know, or maybe not impress Rick, but he does it to, like, for his own gain, right? It's quite clear what he's doing. Yeah, so for me, I think Alpha is a little bit superior in the comics. So she's going there. Amy is honestly same. Actually, no, show superior, because Amy in the comics doesn't have any build up. She is literally just a face, and I think she dies in like issue 2 or issue 3. She dies really quickly, and she doesn't have any build up at all. We just know she's Amy and her sister's Andrea. In the show, they do like a little bit of build up before she dies. So I think she is show superior. Andrea is obviously a comic superior character. Now I think Andrea does get a lot of unwarranted hate. I don't think she's like the worst character in the Walking Dead TV show by any metric, but she certainly isn't my favorite. So for me personally, I think Andrea in the comics, obviously she survives way longer. She's a lot more developed. Obviously she's comic superior. Andrew, this one's tricky. I probably would say show superior, actually. I wouldn't even say same level, because I think Andrew, in the very least in the show, he actually amounts to something. Like, he essentially gets Laurie and T-Dog killed, because of his actions and because of Rick's inaction and the fact that Rick sort of taunts him and leaves him there to be eaten instead of either A, finishing him off, or B, sparing him, right? So I think Andrew probably is a bit better in the show, but again, not by much. Arat. Now, there is a character in the comics called Tara. Obviously, they called Arat because it's Tara backwards, and they already had a Tara. So I'm going to be comparing Arat to Tara from the comics. Now, Tara in the comics is like a Negan loyalist who sort of tries to do like a little coup, I think, to sort of maybe not get Negan back in power, but he's on his sort of side. Honestly, I think Arat show comics probably about the same level. I don't really massively prefer one or the other. I think they have a little bit of a different function. Does Tara die in the comics? I don't think she does, actually. But yeah, Axel. I think this one's probably same level, to be honest, because I think Axel in the comics doesn't really amount to much either. To Axel in the show, they both are killed off like. It's just another death, really. It's just a shocking death. The Battle of the Prison in the comics is obviously a lot more brutal. A lot of people die. And Axel's just one of those many sort of casualties that's killed by the governor's militia. But in the show, again, he doesn't really do much. He's just kind of there. He's a nice guy. I guess we learn a bit more about him in the show, but not by much. Not to the point where, I don't know, it really affects my opinion too much. I would say he's on the same level. Benjamin, now, there is a character from the Kingdom called Benjamin. He appears in, I think 2 issues. He's barely anyone. I don't know if I can really compare them, because it's like the same name, but there's nothing else really about them. But if I am going to, I'd say obviously show superior, because that one's much, built up better. Beta, this one's tricky, because I think Beta's, actually, no, it's not tricky. It's comic superior. Beta has the fight with Negan, which is awesome. Beta's death is a bit of a letdown in the comics, I'm not going to lie, but it's also a bit of a letdown in the show. There's no big final battle. It's cool that he pulls the knives out of his eyes. Actually, no, but he doesn't even do that, because that's in his... Wait, does he do that? I'm trying to think, what's part of his vision? No, he does do that. Does he actually do that? No, Daryl pulls the knives out of his eyes. He pulls the knives out of his eyes in his vision. Anyway, yeah. Oh, whatever. I don't even remember. I'm forgetting now. But I don't know. Beta is just a little bit better in the comics for me. Just because they actually do those fight scenes, and I feel like Beta. Yeah, but he's cool in the show too. Don't get me wrong. He is really fucking cool in the show. So maybe I will put him same level. No, because we get the fight scenes. Beth. Now I'm gonna say that Beth is probably her comic version is Billy. Right, because Herschel's other child who's more prominent. Beth and Billy, I'd say, were probably similar, and in that respect, she's definitely a show superior character, because I think Billy in the comics, again, I think a lot of the early sort of comics, the prison stuff especially, a lot of those characters are there just to be faces. They don't really have that much development. So for me, I think Beth is superior to Billy. Bob Stuckey is I really like him in the novels. Now, Bob Stuckey in the novels is obviously he's a white guy who lives in Woodbury, and Bob Stuckey in the show is a black dude who obviously is found on the road. He never was part of Woodbury. So comparing their characters is also pretty annoying, but or not really accurate, because they are two very different characters with the same name. But I really like Bob in the show. I really like Bob in the books. Maybe not so much the comics, but I'm going to be counting the novels too, because obviously they do build on the characters, like I would count any web episodes or spin-off shows. So I'm going to count the novels. And for that reason, I'm going to put Bob Stuckey on the same level. I think that's probably fair. If anything, leaning towards comic superior, but because I really love Bob in the show, I can't bring myself to do it. Carl is obviously comic superior, because although I do like Carl in the show, don't get me wrong, we all can agree that killing Carl was the biggest mistake ever. I don't think any fan agrees that killing Carl was a good thing in the show, and obviously, you know, I think Carl in the comics, his best story arc, his best one is the Whisperer stuff. That's like Carl's, he shines in that. And that was the shit that he missed. That, you know, Chandler Riggs, Carl, missed that, which is so annoying. Carol is obviously show superior, because Carol in the comics is barely a character. She's just some nice lady with a child. She gets with Tyrese, and then after Tyrese cheats on her, she goes crazy and has a zombie biter. Wild, weird storyline. Not a fan of it. Do you know what? Low-key, rereading the comics, I think a lot of it's kind of trash. Like, I think a lot of the early stuff is kind of trash. I can't lie. Yeah, Carol in the show is way better. Connie in the show is obviously way better. Is it Connie in the comics? It is Connie, yeah. Connie's, like, in the comics is barely a character. So, Kelly's a man in the comics as well. And then there's Magna, Yumiko, and Luke. Yeah. Yeah, Connie's barely a character in the comics. I think Kelly's the one who loses the arm, right? But Kelly's a man in the comics. I keep forgetting. And I think Connie and Kelly are, like, dating in the comics. We've got Cindy is not applicable. The Oceanside is not women. The only Oceanside member we meet is a guy called Pete, and I think we meet a few others in the Michonne Telltale game. So, yeah. There is no women in Oceanside, apart from Michonne. Dale is comic superior. I love Show Dale, don't get me wrong. I just think Comic Dale is he has a lot more build-up. He obviously has the relationship with Andrea, adopting Ben and Billy, and then their death and everything that follows from that, and then the whole Fear the Hunters, or whatever, the Fight the Hunters, whatever it's called. The Hunters storyline, where they obviously gets his leg chopped off, where he has the tainted meat stuff, which obviously Bob has in the show. Yeah, I think Dale is superior in the comics. Dante is obviously superior in the comics. Dante in the show is an awful, terrible plot twist. Also, the character's written in a really cringe, weird way, and he's just a creeper. Daryl does not exist, so Daryl goes in the NA. Rapey Dave, I think the guy in the comics is also called Dave. Same level. I mean, they literally have the same function as the character. I don't think maybe the show version has a few more lines, but that's about it. Dawn, there isn't any Dawn. Deanna, obviously, is called Douglas in the comics. And I think it's probably about the same level. I like Douglas a lot as well, but I think I like how Deanna mellowed out more. But I think I like how Douglas was a bit more defiant as Rick was trying to, like, take over, or, you know, was, you know, ruling his roost and ruling his rules. Deanna kind of comes off as the politician, because she is a politician, whereas Douglas was, like, I think in a sense kind of very personally offended. So, and yeah, I don't know. Deanna feels like in season 6 especially, she does just kind of keel over a little too easily, but I guess that makes sense because of the loss of her husband and her son. Yeah. Denise is, unironically, probably show superior. Denise in the comics is definitely a good character. I don't hate her, but I think they just did a lot more build-up with Denise. They had her clear, you know, she's a one-season character. She starts off as a coward, feels like she can't do anything. She steps up, becomes the Doctor, saves Carl's life, and then, obviously, she dies, doing something stupid, admittedly, but, you know, doing something that she wants to do, you know, risking her life for something that she finds meaning in, you know? And I kind of like Denise's arc in that way. In the comics, she has not really the same thing. She doesn't really have that. She's just the Doctor who kind of saves, I think she does, she's the one who saves Carl, yeah. And then she gets bitten by a zombie, Holly, I believe. Yeah, she's superior in the show. Diane, I don't think there is a Diane, so she's an NA. DJ, is there a DJ in the comics? Maybe I should be double checking some of these minor characters, because I don't think there is a DJ in the comics, but there's probably like a character I can, there probably is a savior I could say is the equivalent for, but to be honest, I don't my knowledge on like minor comic characters is probably less than the show, so I'm gonna stick it there. There is no dog. Damn. Dwayne, same level. I mean, really, Dwayne does the same thing, really, in the comics than he does in the show. If anything, I would probably lean towards the show superior, but I'm just going to leave him same level. Dwight is superior in the comics, in my opinion. I like how he stays and he doesn't get shipped off to a spin-off series where they completely bastardize his character and turn him into, like, not even, he doesn't even resemble Dwight in season 6. I was rewatching season 6 Dwight, where he's fucking evil, and season 7 Dwight, he's maniacal. He's an asshole. He never sort of loses that in the comics. He aligns with Rick, right, and he fights against Negan, but he's got that sort of slickness about him, you know, that sort of slyness to him in the comics. He doesn't lose that. And that obviously ultimately ends in him kind of causing that little rebellion that he does to try and, uproot the Commonwealth, which causes Rick to shoot him in the head. Yeah, comic superior for sure. Earl, I don't think Earl dies in the comics. He's definitely in the comics. I probably would say show superior. They built, although not by much. Because Earl in the comics doesn't really do much. He's just kind of there, really. Whereas they give him a lot of character. Obviously, in the comics, he has a son called Ken who dies. And yeah, they have like some consequential, actions that occur. And Earl's character as well, I just think, although, yeah, he dies. I don't know. I think they gave him like a lot more story, I felt. Even with Tammy as well. I think... Yeah, Tammy in the comics kind of comes across as just a nagging old woman. But in the show, she's like a grieving mother. Eastman does not exist. Ed does not exist. Although he's, I guess, kind of mentioned. But I'm not going to count that. And he's kind of like... Or her husband's mentioned, at least. Carol's husband. Eduardo... Same level. I mean, he doesn't really do anything. I mean, he's... has some lines in the comics, he has some lines in the show. He does disappear in the show, which is a bit annoying, and like never reappears again. But honestly, his inclusion's not that important. So there is no Jenna. Enid, is there someone I could say is the equivalent to Enid? There is a girl called Anna. I guess in a sense, kind of Sophia. She kind of does take Sophia's story, but I think I'm just gonna play it safe and put her in the NA. And I say she kind of takes Sophia's stories like that friend and sort of quasi-girlfriend to Carl. Eric is probably show superior just because I think they give him a little bit more to do, a few more lines, although not by much. I think it's probably actually same level. I think I'm being too nice. Eugene this might be a controversial one. No, I'm debating this. I'm hardcore debating this. Because, right, listen, I'm going to go with show superior for two reasons. One, I feel like his character overall, although in the comics I think the sort of all-out war stuff is done better with Eugene. So, like, all-out war Eugene is definitely better in the comics. In the show, I think they do everything else better than the comics. I think all the Cure stuff's good. I like the fact that Eugene is kind of like, you know, on the spectrum and all that, but he is like very smart, and I like some of the stuff with him in the Sanctuary, like is it called Hostiles and Calamities, that episode where he first arrives at the Sanctuary. I really like that episode as a Eugene episode. It's the season 8 All Out War stuff where I think they made Eugene too much of a turncoat, and I think undid a lot of the character development he had in season 6. Yeah, and I was okay with him siding with Negan briefly, but I think he should have got out of that quicker. It shouldn't have been all the way to the finale, because it's not until the finale where he finally, is back on Rick's side again. But I think everything else in the show was done better with Eugene. I just think he's a more rounded character. He's got more about him, and honestly, I feel like the comic character. If he's there, he was interesting, but I don't know. He didn't read as fun. Ezekiel is tricky. I think he is show superior, although I do think he should have died at the Pike death. I just think Ezekiel in the comics kind of comes across as a little bit of an egomaniac, a little bit whiny, and he dies sort of suddenly. Now, I don't like Ezekiel's comic death, but I think it should have been the death that the show got. Now, let me explain it. Let me unpack that for you. Okay, so the reason why is in the comics, he kind of doesn't really do much. He's like moping around a bunch. The fair happens, and he dies. In the show, he's so joyful, he's so cheerful, he's so happy. You know, he's not banging Michonne and like getting all sad about it. He's just like, he's a cheerful, happy dude, okay? And I think if he were to bring all these communities, and also they have the added storyline of all the communities being splintered away from each other because of what happened with Jocelyn and the, you know, they all falling out with each other. He's bringing all these communities back. He is the glue holding them all together. And so I think with that leading to his death, but he's united them, right, to fight against the Whisperers now. That would have made that death work, all right? But in the comics, it just didn't. And in the show, he stuck around, and I don't think he did anything that interesting post-season 9. There's a few things here and there. I like some of the stuff in the Commonwealth Ezekiel does, but I think overall, they gave him too much of a happy ending. And I think they let too many characters live, to be honest. But, yeah, I still think Ezekiel on the show is superior for me. Gabriel is easy show superior. They did way more with his character. In the comics, he shows up, he tells his whole story about how he locked his congregation, and he becomes a fucking background character for the rest of it, right? Oh, I think he does tell Douglas about the Rick's group being the devil and all that. Maybe. I think so. I think that happens. Unless I'm lying to myself. And then in the Whisperer War, he just dies randomly, and it's like, oh, alright, okay, bye, Gabriel. It's so shit. So awful. Yeah. Show version, way better. He actually has a character arc. And he has a character arc every season. He even has one in season 5, right? It's kind of crazy. People don't remember that. Like, they actually gave Gabriel, like, a nice arc every season. Gage? Is there a Gage in the comics? I don't believe so. Now, there is... I feel like there isn't, right? No. I don't think so. There's like Joshua from Alexandria, but I feel like that's no, I don't think I can compare those two. Mary, there is no Mary. Now Gareth, there's a guy, obviously in the comics he's not called Gareth, he's called Chris, but basically the leader of the hunters, right? I think probably show superior. They actually give him a character. They explain why he's resorted to cannibalism. I think building up Terminus and all that and having Rick destroy it was all, you know, really cool as well. So, yeah, overall, I like Gareth in the show more. I think he's a lot better in the show for me. We got Gary. I don't know. Is there a savior called Gary? I don't even know. I feel like there isn't. There's John. But it feels weird if I'm just comparing the two black guys, right? It's like, oh yeah, I guess he's John because he's black. He is bold like John in the comics though. He just doesn't have the eye. I'm just gonna put him in the NA though. Gavin, there is no Gavin. Glenn. Now Glenn is a tricky one because I love Glenn in the comics and I'm including the Telltale game as well. I've got to include that because that's comic universe. I love him in the show. I don't know. I love him in both. He has to be same level. He is the ultimate same level character. Yeah, I can't not decide. Gregory, I think his show superior. He's funny. He lasts too long for sure. He gets away with too much, but at least he's hilarious in the show. In the comics, he's just annoying. Godulia is Gilmero. Sorry, Godulia. Getting the Hispanics mixed up now. God, Gilmero. Yeah, he goes there. Dr. Carson, I think is probably show superior. Again, they give him a lot more to do, although he does ultimately die. Again, in the comics, he's just sort of there as a background character. Heath is comic superior. I mean, I really like Heath in the comics, and he kind of becomes that sort of... He sort of takes over, like, Glenn's role a little bit, I guess, like, as that sort of... that runner type guy, you know, that scavenger type sort of, and he does lose a leg as well, which is pretty sad. And obviously he goes out with Denise. There's a lot of stuff that Heath does in the comics, and obviously he doesn't disappear randomly. So yeah, I would say he's comic superior for me for sure. Henry, there isn't a Henry, but let's briefly consider him as a Carl adaptation, right? Because I know Carl, we already have Carl, but then Carl dies and Henry takes Carl's story. So let's briefly talk about Henry if we're just considering him like a Carl adaptation, right? He's comic superior. Because I think they did that storyline way better in the comics. Herschel is, unironically, show superior. In the comics, he's a nagging old bastard who dies, and it's pretty pathetic. In the show, they turn him into like a really fucking beautiful character. A beautiful character, okay? The man of wisdom, Rick's dad, basically. You know, he and I think all the Barnes stuff was done way better too. Yeah, just easy show superior. And I think his death was like perfect. Jackie kind of exists if you sort of see her as like a Donna, because she's kind of like what Donna does in the comics. So I'm gonna consider her as that. It's a very loose comparison, but and then for that reason I'd say same level, right? So considering her as like a Donna sort of a Donna, like the version of her in the comics is kind of Donna, just because like Donna looks after Jim, Donna is the laundry person, and Donna kind of dies around about the same time, you know, after they leave the Atlanta camp. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of consider her as like a Donna version. There is no Jadis, there's no clear character. Jared, there isn't really a Jared either, because Benjamin in the comics doesn't die. Even if you could say that they are like the same characters, then they're not. There is no Jerry. Jessie, I think, is easily show superior. I think they did more with her. Although I feel like the Andersons probably should have survived longer, personally. At the very least, Jessie. I think maybe Sam could have died. Maybe Ron could have died. It could have been interesting to see Jessie survive a little bit longer and then just kind of go into depression and die. I don't know, something like that. Maybe that's too depressing. But like Jessie like adapts to the world. You know, they have that whole storyline of her adapting to this new world, and then turns out she wasn't really ready for it. Jesus is easy comic superior character. Jesus in the show is annoying. He's a preachy, whiny bitch, right? Who complains a lot. He murders people in one scene, like he shoots them in the satellite outpost in season 8, episode 2. And in the next scene, he's like to Tara, "We don't have to kill this guy. We didn't have to kill those people before. You know, you could have said, shh, on your knees. You know, shh, on your knees now." But he participates in murdering these people. And also, Jesus participated in murdering the people in their sleep at the satellite outpost. People seem to forget that. But Jesus seemed to forget that, even though he's in the building where that happened. And Jesus is like, "Oh no, we can't kill Dean. We can't kill this guy who just tried to kill me, who's evil and just stepped on Maggie's medication for her baby. Oh no, we can't kill her." I don't know what the fuck they did to Jesus. I think it's because the actor wanted to be a pacifist, or that's why I don't know how true that is. If it is true, that's so stupid. Yeah, it's so dumb. I think Jesus in the comics is so much cooler. He's got all those cool, things. And also, we've got to consider Jesus in season 3 of the Telltale game. I mean, that little flirtation with Javier is pretty cool too. So yeah, Jesus, comic superior, easy. Jimmy, I mean, there isn't really a Jimmy. I guess maybe you could say I reject comparing Jimmy and Billy, because I think Beth more suits that. Jimmy could maybe be compared to, oh god, I don't know, like Arnold or something, like one of Herschel's other children. There isn't really a good Jimmy comparison. I'm going to put him in the NA. Jim, I think, is about same level. I kind of don't like the stuff with Jim digging the graves in the show. I feel a bit weird about that. But, I mean, the comics, pretty much the same thing, you know. The death is the same. It's ripped right from the page. Joe the Claimer. Now, I think Joe is called, like, Jed, is it, or something, in the things? Judd. I think he's called Judd, not Jed. Judd, yeah. He's a part of the Marauders. Yeah, show superior. They built him up a lot more. He doesn't just, the ones in the comics kind of come out of nowhere, and then that's it, and then they're killed off. Whereas, like, Joe, has a few episodes. We build him up and his, like, philosophy and all that. So, way better in the show. Fat Joey does not exist, actually. Judith, now, this is, like, almost, I may as well put Judith here, because Judith, it doesn't exist in the comics, really, because she's born and then dies, like, 2 weeks after she's born, if that. But if I'm going to, obviously she's show superior, because she actually survives. Cal, I mean, I can't. He dies in the comics and he disappears in the show. There isn't really much I can't really put Cal anywhere. I mean, he's just there, really, same level. Kelly, I think is show superior. Again, Kelly in the comics barely speaks, just like Connie in the comics barely does anything. Yeah, easy goes there. There is a Laura, I think, in the Saviors. Now Laura, I know, yes, because Laura is the woman who kind of is like the main leader of like the sort of Negan rebellion. Like she kind of is like the leader of the Saviors, I think, or she's like one of the leaders of the Saviors. After Negan is defeated, that is, and then because she's seen in the time jump, you know, being all angry and mad because obviously Sherry gets or Dwight gets killed, and because Laura is Dwight's maybe like girlfriend, I think they're going out in the comics, or at least she's loyal to him or whatever. I forget. Okay, I am basing this off memory, so maybe this isn't the most well-informed video. Maybe I will change these opinions in the future. But yeah, I think Laura probably is. Like, I feel like comics superior, maybe. I'm going to go with same level, though, because I like her in the show. Her death's annoying, but then in the comics, like, I like that whole dynamic. But then, again, it just kind of ends at a stalemate. It's not that interesting. Lily is easy comic superior. If we're talking Lily Chandler, whatever you say it, or Lily Cole, sorry, because it'll be Lily Cole. So Lily Cole in the books and comics is just a fucking cool ass badass, right? In the show, I like her, don't get me wrong, but she's way better in the comics. But to be fair, it's kind of hard to really compare these two characters because Lily isn't like the girlfriend to the governor, but she is the person who kills the governor, and you know, she is like closely related to the Battle of the Prison. So I feel like it's probably fair to say that they're somewhat the same character. Now we got Lizzie, and I'm gonna grab Mika as well. So Lizzie and Mika are not in the comics, but there is two characters called Ben and Billy who basically effectively are like the gender swap versions of these characters. And I'm going to say straight off the bat, both of these are show superior because the Ben and Billy stuff in the comics, although it's cool, it's not really built up that well. And I think in the show, they build up way, like from like episode 1, we see Lizzie is a bit of a freak, all right? We get that. I shouldn't say freak, you know, it's pretty unstable. We get that like straight away. And then, you know, it slowly develops into what it becomes. So easy, she's on the show superior. So we've got Laurie Grimes is tricky. I'm going to say show superior. The reason why is because Laurie in the show is a lot more complex than Laurie in the comics. Laurie in the comics is a character who does get mad at Rick here and there, but like mostly just kind of goes along with the ride, right? She barely does much. I was reading like an issue recently where she like reveals she's pregnant, and even that's like kind of like, I don't know. I think they put a lot more drama in the stuff with her and Shane, and I think keeping Shane alive definitely helped because I think that made Laurie's character and the interactions with him and Rick and all that a lot more interesting. Now, does Laurie get a little bit annoying in season 2? A little bit, okay, but I don't think she's a terrible person. I don't think she's a terrible mother. I don't think she's a terrible character. There's a few things that are written that are a bit weird, but also Rick's not great to her in season 3 either. I love how everyone likes to talk about how Laurie's a terrible like wife, right, and a terrible mother, but they don't talk about how Rick like treated her in season 3. He treated her like a fucking like T-Dog. Like he treated her like so coldly and so bluntly and so mean, right? Yeah. So no one ever likes to talk about that, but they like to talk about how Laurie was a bit annoying in season 2 to Rick, right? Yeah. So for me, she is show superior because I think in the comics, and her death is like way better in the show too. So yeah, Luke is. Although he does disappear and then come back, I think he's show superior. In the comics, he barely does anything and then gets his head chopped off. I already loved him, like, in the first episode he's, like, properly in, where he has a lot, like, he has, like, that sort of charisma, and I think the actor does bring that to the character, for sure. You know, he really brings it to life. So for me, yeah, show superior. Lydia is easy comic superior character. And this obviously happens because Carl's alive. I think that really helped. Although I definitely like Cassidy McKinley's portrayal of Lydia, and I do think there is some strong moments there, especially the stuff with, like, Carol the Herd at the end of season 10, or the original ending of season 10. I just feel like Lydia in the comics goes on to do more. In the show, she sort of becomes just a background character, and I think losing that relationship between Henry or Carl and Lydia, losing that, I think really hurts Lydia's character. And again, they didn't know what the fuck to do with her in season 11, so they randomly made her and Elijah become a thing, and then they were like, oh fuck, we gotta do one more thing with Lydia. Let's have her lose an arm. So stupid. They didn't know what to do with her. Yeah, and it shows. That's why killing off Henry was a stupid decision, right? Maggie is tricky. I think I'm going to go comic superior. I just feel like Maggie's arc is way more well defined in the comics, I feel. Although I really like Show Maggie too. I really do. It's a hard one. I just felt like Maggie in the comics was a bit better for me. I like how she stands up to Rick a lot more. I like how she does her own. I think she's a lot more brutal and a lot more to the point in the comics too. And I kind of like the stuff with her and Glenn a lot more too. I prefer a lot. They're being kinky in the prison. I kind of like that in the comics. It's kind of it makes sense because she's a sheltered girl on this farm. For me, I think Maggie comic is superior. Although the show is it's so close. It's so close to same level. It really is. But I think I have to give the edge to comic Maggie. Magna is easy comic superior. I just don't know what. Maybe it's the actress. Maybe it's how she was directed. I'm not blaming the actress, but maybe it's how she was directed. Or maybe it's how she's written. But Magna in the show just gets on my nerves. I just don't find her interesting. I just find her boring. So at least in the comics she has a bit more to do, but not by much. Because in the comics she doesn't do much either. Martinez, I feel is probably comic superior just because I think he amounts to a bit more in the comic. He sort of comes to the prison and then leaves to go tell the location, and then you have Rick running him over, which is pretty cool. In the show he's cool too. It's a toss up. Maybe I would go same level actually. I think same level. Martin doesn't exist, kind of, although there's other hunters there, but I feel there isn't one I can directly one-to-one him on. Merle doesn't exist. Michonne is... I think I'm going to have to go same level. I love comic Michonne. I love show Michonne. I can't decide. Okay? Sue me. I just can't decide. There is no Milton. There is no Morales. Although you can maybe say he's Alan. But we already kind of did Alan. But, yeah. In the fact that he's just man with family. Morgan is... easy show superior, although I hate what they did with Morgan on Fear the Walking Dead. It beats what they did with him in the comics, where he shows up again only to die in Alexandria during No Way Out, and it's the most inconsequential, lackluster death ever. Yeah, so easy show superior character. Natalya is an NA. Negan Smith. Okay, everyone's gonna hate me. I understand. It's okay. I much prefer Negan in the comics because I like the fact that... So this is my rationale, okay? So in the show, they really try to redeem Negan hardcore. To the point where it's they want you to think that actually he wasn't such a bad guy after all. So Negan points out, well, those people in the satellite outpost, they had families, and you killed them. Fair point. And then he points out, well, what's it? He never killed kids and things like that. I never killed kids. Well, he says to Brandon. And don't make no mistake, right? What the show is trying to do is trying to say, Negan's not so bad because he doesn't kill children. And this guy eventually kills children, right? No make mistake. That's what the show is trying to do, right? That's what it's trying to tell you. Which is hilarious because in that story in the comics, right? Brandon is a child. He's a teenager in the comics, right? I'm talking about the comics. And Negan kills him. Kills him when he's no longer used to him. Now, Negan in the comics doesn't change. And that's why, actually, he does change. But he doesn't change his, brutality, right? His brutality sticks. And I think that's way cooler. His crassness, his childlikeness, and the fact that he's brutal and will do whatever he needs to do That's comic Negan, and that stuff doesn't change. Now, what does change, what is his arc in the comic, is that he realigns himself. He realizes that there is no point carrying on to fight Rick. He wants to realign himself to be an asset to Rick and get his freedom that way, right? And that's what he does, and he kind of gains respect for Rick, and Rick gains respect for him somewhat. Now, Rick still doesn't fucking like him. Rick still exiles him, which makes sense. But he kind of... he realigns himself, but also, like, you have the stuff with Lucille as well, where he's fighting Beta with Lucille, and like the sort of tragedy of him realizing what, the whole thing with the bat, and they did that in the show as well. And I like the stuff. I like how they did it in the show, but it was like it was in a line with his I don't know, with his sort of his redemption in the comics, if you will. But his redemption in the comics was a lot better because Negan never tried to tell people that he was like not such a bad guy, right? And I think, he does like nice things, right? I'm sure Negan in the comics would probably save Carl, right? If it came down to it. But what I'm trying to say is that basically, overall, I feel like his character feels a lot more consistent in the comics. Where in the show, I think they flip-flop a lot, and I really don't like Negan like post season 8, really. I think Negan's okay in season 8, although again, All Out War takes far too long. There's a reason why Negan is exiled in the comics, because it makes no sense why he would be walking around them. It makes no sense why Maggie and Negan are like in the same scene together, because Maggie should just kill Negan, right? Or she's past it, right? But she's not past it. I don't know. Fuck me. Oh god, that's another thing. Like the whole Negan Maggie resolution was done way better in the comics, and they just left it at that. Like Maggie and Negan never see each other post that. I don't think. Maybe. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe they do at some point. Maybe I'm misremembering. I always prefer Negan in the comics personally. So sue me. There you go. Although I think the Here's Negan episode and the Here's Negan comic, the episode is superior to the comic. I'll give you that one. Right, I'll give you that one, Negan stance. And Nicholas, I think, is show superior because in the comics he is just a guy who seems okay, who gets a bit annoyed sometimes, and then he gets stabbed and killed at the hilltop. He gets Tobin's death in the comics. In the show, he's built up as this cowardly guy, right, who tries to change but ultimately can't. I think there's a nice story there. Noah does not exist. Olivia, I'm going to go show superior, although actually probably same level. Same level, yeah, why not? Although, show superior just because she slaps Negan. Oscar, there isn't really an Oscar, and I don't feel comfortable comparing him to one of the other black guys in the prison, so I'm just going to say there isn't an Oscar. Otis, I think, is probably comic superior. Maybe, but I'm only saying that because he survives longer, really. I don't know. I think Otis just serves his purpose in the show. Yeah, because he's like a good moral dilemma. I think I'm going to put him there. Owen, I mean, I guess there is the member of the Scavengers, right? The leader of the Scavengers. I forget his name. In the comics, there's basically these guys who invade Alexandria like a short time after Rick and Co. show up. A bunch of these, like, I think they are just called the Scavengers. I don't know if Jadis technically... I know there's Jadis is called the Scavengers, but realistically, the wolves more resemble the comic book scavenger characters. Yeah, I think that would probably be fair. I don't remember what the names were. I think the main guy was called... Yeah, main guy was called Carlos. So I guess we'll consider Owen Carlos. In that respect, he should show superior, because the Scavengers in the comics like show up for like a panel and all die. So Patricia, comic superior. She's actually like got like a bit of characterization in the comic actually. So yeah, but she's not really a character at all in the show. She's just kind of there and then dies. Pete is same level. He's pretty much ripped straight from the comic really. Juanita Sanchez, aka Princess, is show superior. I find her annoying as fuck in the comics. I hated her, really. And I thought it was like a really weird, like... It felt, maybe it's because I was a lot more like, maybe I was a bit more like sort of edgy, kind of like Le Pepe when I was younger, right? But when I first read it, I thought, why the fuck, like, and she's talking about, like, oh my god, we got such a diverse group here. We've got an Arab guy, we've got, like, an Asian girl, we've got, like, a white guy, we got me, a Latino. You know, it felt, like, really forced, like, really, like, I actually, no, it was forced. That's, like, really cringe, like, way to do diversity, right? And I was like, why the fuck is, like, Kirkman writing this character like this? And she just, like, she would say some stupid batshit things. In the show, they really do her justice. Like, I didn't care about Princess at all in the comics. I was like, it was just telling her tragic story, right? I was like, I don't care. In the show, I do. I care for her. She's kooky, she's wacky, she is that same sort of thing. But they add this sort of, like, the mental health stuff, and maybe it's the way the actress performs her as well. I fucking love her in the show. I really do. This is a character that was, like, I honestly found way better in the show. There isn't a Rachel. There isn't a Randall. There isn't really Regina, unless you can kind of say she kind of looks like Laura, but we already did Laura, so there isn't a Regina. There is a Regina in the there is a Regina Monroe, which obviously is Reg, and I think is show superior because Reg is a cool guy. He's the architect, and he's used to explain, like, how Alexandria has been built and stuff, because he's the architect and all that. And I think I cared a lot more about him dying than I did Regina, who was a shouty woman. There is a Richard in the kingdom in the comics. He just kind of gets killed off though. He's like one of the first kingdomers to die. He's definitely a show superior character. He's a way built up way more in the comics. Sorry, in the show. In the comics, he's just a guy with a name who gets killed. Now, Ricky Dicky Doodah Grimes is very, very tricky, and I refuse to do it. So I'm just gonna say novel. I refuse to say if he's superior in either, because ultimately, I love both versions of the character, and I think both versions are equally as good. But if you're gonna say don't be a pussy, you got to decide. If I had to decide, I'd say show, but I'm not locking it in. I refuse to lock it in. I would say probably the show. It tilts towards show superior. It does tilt towards show superior, but I refuse to lock it in. So he's going there. All right, sue me. RJ doesn't exist. Ron does exist, but I'm not counting Ron as the adaptation to Ron in the comics. I'm counting Sam as the adaptation to Ron in the comics, because Sam is younger. He's the scared kid, and in that respect, he's show superior because they built it up a lot more. Right, it was actually built up. We could see it coming from a mile away. Whereas in the comics, it kind of does come out of nowhere again, and he's just like a kid who's there. It's Jesse's kid. Rick's banging Jesse. So yeah, Rosita is show superior, easy. The comics, she's a background character pretty much. She does fuck all and then gets her head put on a pike. The show, they really build her up. They give her a lot more depth to her character, to her relationships. They just make her like the resident slut, right? And they don't do anything else with her in the comics. If it doesn't feel like it. She doesn't do much. She's there, she fights, but there's not much characterization. Whereas in the show, she gets loads. I was going to say fuck tons. Sasha. Now, I'm going to consider Sasha the comic version of Holly, right? Although Sasha does show up way earlier than Holly does. But because she serves all of Holly's storyline in the comics, and Holly is a fairly big character in the comics, like a mid-level character, I'm going to consider Sasha the adapted version of Holly, and in that respect, she's easily show superior. And that's not even counting like the season 3, 4, 5 stuff. If we're just counting like the end of season 5, like all the Alexandria stuff up to her death, and comparing that to Holly, Sasha still clears. Scott is a character that's probably, I guess, better in the show. In the comics, he's just a guy who dies of an infection. So I guess he's better in the show. Shane, easy show superior character, like the best version of like how you adapt a character. In the comics, he doesn't do much really. He gets angry at Rick, tries to shoot Rick pretty much straight away after Rick shows up at the Atlanta camp, and then Carl kills him. Before they even leave the Atlanta camp, he's dead, right? And then they leave the Atlanta camp, and then later after Rick finds the prison, he comes back to put down Walker Shane. Okay, so Shane literally dies like the equivalent of season 1, right? So why in God's fucking name would I say that Shane in the comics was better than Shane in the show, because Shane in the show, he peaked in season 2. That was his season. All right, and Shane was just such a tragic, awesome character. Sherry, quite easily comic superior. Same with Dwight. Same thing goes. They ruin her in Fear. I say they ruin her in Fear. She doesn't really do much in the show anyway. In the comics, she's way better. She has that whole thing with Rick, and she ends up getting accidentally killed by Rick Grimes. It's pretty brutal. It's pretty tragic. Siddiq is show better, because in the comics he doesn't do much really. Although we have to account for the Telltale game, but still, Siddiq in the comics is just, he goes on the mission with the Commonwealth to be fair, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I much prefer him in the show. I like the PTSD stuff. I don't like the way that they killed Siddiq off in the show, but that's alright. I just hate the spy storyline. But Siddiq in the comics survives to the end, and he just doesn't really do much post that. There is no Simon. Sophia, obviously easy comic superior character. Although I do like the whole Barnes stuff. Sophia just lives a lot longer in the comics, and she becomes Carl's wife. So how could I say that she's not superior? We've got Spencer. Now, unironically, I think he is show superior. I think they built up Spencer. Like, I understand Spencer a lot more in the show than I do in the comics, and why he does that with Negan. And I'm not even 100% convinced that he was fully betraying Rick. I think he obviously wanted Rick to be removed from power. But Richard does say to Razia, like, he wants to try and butter up the Saviors, right? To get in a more advantageous position. He's trying to work like a politician, right? To try and get chummy with Negan, to try and, give them a bit more freedom or something, right? And obviously, for Spencer, Rick shows up and his whole family fucking dies, right? So you can understand why Spencer doesn't trust Rick and thinks that Rick it brings more bad than good. But I think even Spencer would probably admit that Rick brings some good, but not all good, right? So I don't know. For me, I think Spencer is just made a bit more complex in the show. So I think I can prefer him there. There is no T-Dog. Tammy Rose, I already talked about her briefly when I was talking about Earl. I think they just built up those characters a lot better, whereas in the comics, Tammy was just an angry, shouting lady. Tara, so there is a character called Tara in the novel. She's the sister to Lily, I think, or is it the sister to Megan, or is it the child? I forget. There is a character called Tara, I think, but to be honest, she's so inconsequential, there's no point comparing them. The Governor, okay. The Governor is easy show superior, okay? Now, people say, what do you mean? What the fuck do you mean? The comic version's much more brutal. He's much more evil. Yes, he is, okay? The comic version of the Governor is an evil, twisted, fucking maniacal weirdo, right? But I think in the show, it's streamlined a lot better. The comic, he's messy, okay? It's a messy character, which I do think gets cleared up a little bit in the novels. But he's a guy who stole his brother's identity, who runs Woodbury, who has his niece chained up and kisses her and stuff and feeds her. It's really fucking weird. And the Governor in the comics is just kind of like crazy. He just chops Rick's hand off randomly, like, we're feeding you. You're the stranger. You're on the menu. And then they have the whole brutal death, the brutal torturing that Michonne does to him. And the Governor is like more brutal. He's more crazy. That's for sure in the comics. I just feel like he is a comic character. He's a cartoon. And the Governor feels like a cartoon. And I think the novels does make him better. And I did say I'm going to include the novels. And I do think that ups a few points. But I just feel like David Morrissey's Governor, for me, is just a lot better. You have a clear arc where he starts off as where he's not even that crazy at the start, right? Governor in the show, he's losing it a bit, but he still has that demeanor. Now in the comics, I don't understand why anyone follows that Governor. He's like crazy. He's fucking mad. He's obviously crazy, but they all follow him. But in the show, I believe it because he's charismatic. As Michonne says, he's this Jim Jones type, right? So the Governor of the show, I just think is, for me, is a lot more mature than the comics, a lot more streamlined in his villainy, and I just think a better performance as well because I really like fucking David Morrissey. I think David Morrissey killed it. And I also think his downfall is way better too because there's a clear, like, the Governor actually has an arc. Like, he almost comes back. He almost becomes a good person again, right? And then he goes right back to it. So for me, yeah, the Governor is show superior. Although I do like the comic Governor. I really like the novel Governor. But I just prefer the show a little bit more. Tobin? probably show superior. Yeah, he has more to do. Tomas, I guess, I mean, I could compare him to Thomas in the comics because they have similar-ish names, but Tomas and Thomas are two very different characters. Maybe Dexter. I think maybe he'd be kind of close to Dexter. If we're going by that, I would probably say same level, to be honest, if I'm comparing him to Dexter. Tyrese is easy comic superior. Sorry, I had to cough. Yeah. I like show Tyrese a little bit. I like some of the moral stuff. I like how he's this gentle sort of giant guy, right? I like the stuff of Karen's death and Carol and him like asking Carol asking, well, Carol admitting it to him and Tyrese forgiving her. And to some degree, I like his death. The comic version's way better. I mean, there's no contest. I'm sorry. Virgil doesn't exist. Yumiko is easy show superior. She has a lot more to do. She's a lot more rounded as a character. I really like her actually in the show, especially in season 11. She steps up. Lucille, easy show superior. Like I said, I think the Here's Negan episode was better than the Here's Negan comic, so I'm going to put Lucille there for sure. Cole doesn't exist. Elijah doesn't exist. Shira doesn't really exist. Max, though, does. And I think for that, I'm going to go same level, because really, Max doesn't do much in the show compared to Stephanie in the comics. They do about the same. They have the whole storyline with Stephanie in the comics with her hair and like being insecure about her like wig, which kind of comes out of nowhere and wasn't that interesting. Or it could have been interesting, but it felt a bit inconsequential compared, with everything else that was going on. And then they kill off Stephanie in the time jump really weirdly. There is no Frost. Lance Hornsby is barely a character in the comics. He's obviously easily show superior. They actually make him into a pretty evil villain, whereas in the comics he's just kind of like a lickspittle to Pamela, I guess. And I don't think he really even shows up after he's introduced. There is no Leah. Michael, Mercer. So Mercer in the comics, Mercer in the show. I mean, I think they're about the same level. They do about the same. They're about as cool. Yeah, they're right. I like Mercer in the show. I like him in the comics. Yeah, they're about the same level. There is no Pope. There is no Gracie. Herschel Jr., I mean, so far, I'd probably say show superior, because in the comics, he's a baby, and then in the flashback where he's an adult, he's, like, really annoying and insufferable, because he wants to do his traveling walker circus thing. Yeah, and he hasn't got that annoying in the show yet, so I guess show superior. Carver doesn't exist. Sebastian, I think, probably show superior. He's annoying. He's an annoying little shit in the comics too, and obviously he kills Rick Grimes, which is pretty big. It's a pretty big moment, but I think his death and leading up, like, he sort of gets what he deserves. He reaps his rewards, and then his death and what leads from that was interesting at first, although I think they kind of butcher it. But yeah, I think I probably do prefer him in the show. I think he's more insufferable in the show than he is in the comics. And in the comics, he murders Rick Grimes, so that's definitely props to the actor and the writing, I guess. Tommy is, I guess maybe you could say he's sort of like, what's her name? Oh god, I can't think of Michonne's daughter's name. Is it Colette? Am I thinking wrong? What is Michonne's daughter's name? Let me quickly find the little note. It's Elodie. Is the other one called Colette? Is the sister called Colette? Am I thinking of the sister? Yeah, the sister's called Colette. Yeah, Elodie. So let's compare Tommy to Elodie, because it's this very basic, like, it's literally the only reason why I could even adapt them is because in the comics, Elodie is Michonne's daughter, who she finds in the Commonwealth, and she works at the cake shop, right, that Tommy works at. Although in the comics, I mean, in the show they called it Elodie's as like a nod to the comics. There is no Elodie on Colette in the show. Obviously, Michonne has a son called Andre Anthony instead. So for that, we're just gonna basically kind of compare Tommy to the Elodie thing. Easy comic superior, because Tommy's cool. He's a cool guy, but like finding your brother is not as big as finding your child, I feel. And I think the stuff they did with Tommy after that was a bit interesting, but I think the stuff with Michonne and her daughter was more interesting. Pamela, I think, is probably show superior. Although I think I hate how she kind of actually no, same level. So benefits for the comic is no, actually, I take that back. I'm so sorry. Show superior. So in the comics, she is just like, she flips evil, not quickly. You know, it builds up to it where she realizes like there's someone threatening the power in the Commonwealth. It makes sense. In the show, she kind of like becomes the villain all of a sudden. Like she seems like pretty reasonable. Like it's all Lance is doing, like, and it's mainly because Lance takes all of the villainary like sort of spotlight, and we believe that Lance is kind of like doing it in the shadows. And then it turns out no, don't worry, Pamela was evil too all along. In the comics, I don't know. Maybe I will go same level. Maybe I'm just gonna go same level. I'm just gonna go there. Whatever. Annie doesn't exist. Brandon is better in the comics. I think he's kind of fucking cartoony in the show, where he's like, "I'm Negan," you know, and he kills the kid. In the comics, he doesn't kill any children. He frees Negan because he's a Negan fan and he wants to like revenge on Rick, right? And he wants to go to the Whisperers to like side with them basically. And then when they get to the border, Negan just fucking kills Brandon and leaves. Bear in mind, Brandon's a kid. All right, Negan in the comics is based. Negan in the show, big ass pussy. All right. Emmett Carson, who cares? Same level. He gets piked in the comic. In the show, he gets burnt. Jules does not exist. Shiva, I mean, I'm gonna go probably show superior. I think she probably does a bit more. She has a few cool scenes, although they're goofy. I'll go show superior. Tyler does not exist. Vickers, I don't think there's someone called Vickers. Is there someone called Vickers? Maybe. If there is, it's inconsequential, so I'm just gonna put them there. And is there a Karen? No, there is no Karen. Oh, that's it then. So there we are. Those are the comic superior characters. Those are the same level that I'm too scared to decide on. And those are the show superior. Now, you notice there's a lot of show superior characters. And that's because I think ultimately the show is better than the comics, okay? The show has issues, don't get me wrong. But I always will hold that the show is better than the comics. The comics, it's kind of trash in parts, alright? It is. There's some cool ass story arcs. I think the Whisperer stuff is done better in the comics. I think the All Out War is probably done better in the comics. I think all of early Walking Dead compared to early Walking Dead comics, the show did it way better, and that includes the shit on the farm as well. Even though like the farm stuff in the comics like lasts like 3 issues. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me why I'm wrong. Get mad at me in the comments. You do that. It's cool. I love it. I love it all. Goodbye.